BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Welcome to the Regency Grand Hotel, a luxurious establishment where everything is not as it seems. Here, 25-year-old Molly works as a maid. Molly is shy and awkward. She's also dedicated, professional, a perfectionist. But a shocking discovery in one of the rooms turns Molly's life upside down, and she's forced to face the world and turn detective to clear her own name. Here's episode 1 of The Maid by Nita Prose. I am your maid. I'm the one who cleans your hotel room, who enters like a phantom when you're out gallivanting for the day, no care at all about what you've left behind. I'm a maid at the Regency Grand Hotel, and my name is Molly. Never in my life did I think I'd hold such a lofty position in a grand hotel. I know others think differently, that a maid is a lowly nobody. I know we're all supposed to aspire to become doctors and lawyers and rich real estate tycoons. But not me. I'm so thankful for my job that I pinch myself every day. I really do. Especially now. Without Gran. Without her. Home isn't home. It's as though all the color has been drained from the apartment we shared. But the moment I enter the Regency Grand, the world turns technicolor bright. I was born to do this job. I love cleaning. There's nothing quite like a perfectly stocked maid's trolley early in the morning. It is, in my humble opinion, a cornucopia of bounty and beauty. The crisp little packages of delicately wrapped soaps. The tiny Crabtree and Evelyn shampoo bottles. And my uniform? If I had to choose between my uniform and my trolley, I don't think I could. Once I'm dressed for my workday, I feel more confident. Like I know just what to say and do. At least most of the time. And once I take off my uniform at the end of the day, I feel naked, unprotected, undone. The truth is, I often have trouble with social situations. It's as though everyone is playing an elaborate game with complex rules they all know, but I'm always playing for the first time. I make etiquette mistakes with alarming regularity, offend when I mean to compliment, misread body language, say the wrong thing at the wrong time. It's only because of my Gran that I know a smile doesn't necessarily mean someone is happy. Sometimes people smile when they're laughing at you. Or they'll thank you when they really want to slap you across the face. Recently, I turned 25. A quarter of a century, my Gran would proclaim to me now, if she could say anything to me, which she can't, because she is dead. The day after her death was a lovely balmy day, and I went to work, as usual. Mr. Alexander Snow, the hotel manager, was surprised to see me.
Molly, what are you doing here? I'm so sorry for your loss. Mr. Preston told me that your grandmother passed away yesterday. I assumed you'd take today off.
It was Gran who died, not me, I replied. The show must go on, you know? His eyes widened, which perhaps suggests shock? I'll never understand it. Why people find the truth more shocking than lies. A few minutes later, I was downstairs in one of the housekeeping change rooms, donning my maid's uniform, as I do every day, as I did just this morning, as I'll do tomorrow, even though someone else, not my Gran, died today. And not at home, but at the hotel. Yes, that's right. Today at work, I found a guest very dead in his bed. Mr. Black. The Mr. Black. Other than that, my workday was as normal as ever. It was today, around 3 in the afternoon, nearing the end of my shift, when the seismic event occurred. I'd cleaned all of my assigned rooms already, including the Blacks' penthouse on the 4th floor, but I needed to return to the suite to finish cleaning their bathroom. Don't think for a moment that I'm sloppy or disorganized in my work just because I cleaned the Black penthouse twice. When I clean a room, I attack it from top to bottom. I leave it spotless and pristine. No surface left unwiped, no grime left behind. Cleanliness is next to godliness, my gran used to say, and I believe that's a better tenet to live by than most. I don't cut corners. I shine them. No fingerprint left to erase. No smear left to clear. So it's not that I simply got lazy and decided not to clean the Blacks' bathroom when I scoured the rest of their suite this morning. Au contraire. The bathroom was guest-occupied at the time of my first sanitation visit. Giselle, Mr. Black's current wife, hopped in the shower soon after I arrived. Mr. Charles Black and his second wife, Giselle Black, are long-time repeat guests at the Regency Grand. Mr. Black was a famous impresario, a magnate, a tycoon. He and Giselle often graced the society pages. He'd been described as a middle-aged silvered fox, though, to be clear, he is neither silver nor a fox. Giselle, meanwhile, was oft described as a young, lithe, trophy socialite. This morning, the first time I entered the Blacks' penthouse, I cleaned it from top to bottom, minus the occupied bathroom because Giselle was in it. She did not seem herself at all. I noted upon my arrival that her eyes were red and puffy. Soon after, she ran off to the bathroom and slammed the door shut behind her. I did not allow her behavior to interfere with the task at hand. On the contrary, I got to work immediately and cleaned the suite vigorously. When it was in perfect order, I stood outside the closed bathroom door with a box of tissues and called out to Giselle the way Mr. Snow had taught me. "Your rooms have been restored to a state of perfection. I'll return later to clean the bathroom." I left the suite then and worked through the 4th floor, room after room. Halfway through my work on that floor, I took a brief respite to deliver my trolley to the basement, where I dropped off 2 large, heavy bags of sullied sheets and towels at the laundry. I decided to pay a visit to Juan Manuel, a dishwasher in the kitchen. I zoomed through the labyrinthine halls, making the familiar turns, rather like a clever trained mouse in a maze. When I reached the wide kitchen doors and pushed through, Juan Manuel stopped everything and immediately got me a large drink of cold water with ice, which I appreciated greatly. After a short and agreeable chat, it was time to circle back to the 4th floor and clean Mr. and Mrs. Black's bathroom. I knocked, as per protocol. "Housekeeping!" No reply. I took my master key card and buzzed into their suite. "Mr. and Mrs. Black, may I complete my sanitation visit? I would very much like to return your room to a state of perfection." Nothing. Clearly, or so I thought, husband and wife were out. I surveyed their sitting room. It was not as I'd left it a few hours earlier. The curtains had been drawn, and there were several small minibar bottles of scotch knocked over on the glass table. Giselle's yellow purse was no longer where I'd seen it in the morning, on the bureau by the entrance, which meant she was traversing the town. A maid's work is never done, I thought to myself. It was looking very much like I'd have to clean the entire suite from scratch. I headed to the bedroom. The door was open, and one of the hotel's plush white bathrobes was strewn on the floor, just outside the threshold. From my vantage point, I could see the bedroom closet, with one door still open. Exactly as I'd left it in the morning, because the safe inside was also open and preventing the closet door from closing properly. Some of the safe's contents were still intact. I could see that much immediately, but the objects that had caused me some consternation in the morning were notably missing. Only then did I see him, Mr. Black. He was wearing the same double-breasted suit he had on earlier when he bowled me over in the hallway. Only the paper in his breast pocket was gone. He was lying down, flat on his back on the bed. His head was resting on one pillow, not two, and the other two pillows were askew beside him. I would have to locate the mandatory fourth pillow, which I most certainly put on the bed this morning when I made it. My first thought upon beholding this scene was not that Mr. Black was dead. It was that he was napping soundly, after having enjoyed more than one afternoon tipple in the sitting room. But upon further observation, I noted some other oddities in the room. On the bedside table, to the left of Mr. Black, was an open bottle of medication. A bottle I recognized as Giselle's. Various small blue pills had cascaded out of the bottle, some landing on the bedside table and others on the floor. A couple of pills had been trampled, reduced to a fine powder that was now ground into the carpet. This would require high vacuum suction, followed by a spot of carpet deodorizer to return the carpet pile to a state of perfection. I thought it prudent to check on Mr. Black and ensure that he was quite all right. This, too, is a maid's professional duty. I took a small step forward to scrutinize his face. There were strange little marks around his eyes, like red and purple pinpricks. Only then did my mind suddenly ring alarm bells. It was at that moment that I fully cued to the disturbing fact that there was more wrong with this situation than I'd realized at the outset. I eased a hand forward and tapped Mr. Black's shoulder. It felt rigid and cold, like a piece of furniture. I'd put my hand in front of his mouth in the desperate hope that I'd feel some breath come out of him, but to no avail. "No, no, no," I said, as I put 2 fingers to his neck, checking for a pulse, which I did not find. I shuffled to the other bedside table, where there was a phone, and I called down to the front desk. "Regency Grand Reception. How can I help you?" "This is Molly, the maid. I'm in the penthouse suite. Please, if you could alert Mr. Snow that there is a guest who is permanently indisposed." "Permanently indisposed?" "He is very dead. Dead in his bed. Call Mr. Snow, and please dial emergency services immediately." It was then that I looked up. On the wall, in front of me, was a gilt-framed mirror, reflecting not only my terrified face back at me, but everything I'd failed to notice before. The vertigo got worse then, the floor tilting like a funhouse. I fainted. Now, as I sit here in Mr. Snow's luxurious office, my hands are shaking. I employ Gran's mental trick to steady myself. Whenever the tension got unbearable in a film, she'd grab the remote control and fast forward. I fast forward and pick up my mental replay at just the right spot. I was still in the suite, but not in the bedroom. I rushed back into the bedroom, grabbed the phone receiver for a second time, and called down to reception. This time, I demanded to speak with Mr. Snow. When I heard his voice on the line saying, "Hello, what is it?" I made sure to be very clear. "This is Molly. Mr. Black is dead. I am in his room. Please call emergency services immediately." Approximately 13 minutes later, Mr. Snow entered the room with a small army of medical personnel and police officers filing in behind him. He led me away, guiding me by the elbow like a small child. And now, here I sit in his office. Mr. Snow left some time ago. Perhaps an hour, maybe more. He told me to stay put until he returned. I have a lovely cup of tea in one hand and a shortbread biscuit in the other. As I gaze down at the teacup, a proper porcelain one, decorated with pink roses and green thorns, I suddenly miss my Gran. Terribly.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
In episode 2 of this abridged version of The Maid by Nita Prose, Molly recalls the events which led up to the moment she discovered the body of Mr. Black. Today had started out as an ordinary day. I came through the stately revolving doors of the hotel. I love greeting Mr. Preston, the Regency Grand's doorman. Portly, dressed in a cap and a long trench coat adorned with gold hotel crests, Mr. Preston has worked at the hotel for over 2 decades. "Good morning, Mr. Preston."
Oh, Molly. Happy Monday to you, my dear girl.
He tips his hat. "Have you seen your daughter recently?"
Why, yes, we had dinner on Sunday. She's arguing a case in court tomorrow. I still can't believe it. My little girl, standing up there in front of a judge. If only Mary could see her now.
Mr. Preston reminds me of Gran. He knew her too. After passing him this morning, I swung through the massive front lobby and dashed down the stairs into the maze of hallways leading to the housekeeping quarters. Like I always do, I put on my fresh maid uniform and collected my housekeeping trolley, making sure it was replenished and ready for my rounds. It was not replenished, which is no surprise, since my supervisor, Cheryl Green, was the one on shift last night. Cheryl may be my boss, but she's definitely not my superior. There's a difference, you know? Cheryl is slovenly and lazy. She cheats and cuts corners. I've actually seen her clean a guest's sink with the same cloth she used to clean their toilet. Can you believe such a thing? Once my trolley was set, I rolled down the hall to the kitchen to visit Juan Manuel. He is a fine colleague. I don't know how Juan Manuel does his job, standing for hours in the unbearable heat and humidity, scraping half-eaten food from plates. All that waste, all those germs. I visit him every day. And every day, I try not to think about it. I've got your key card. Room 308. Early checkout today. I will clean the room now so it's ready for you whenever you want it, okay? I'd been slipping Juan Manuel key cards for at least a year, ever since Rodney explained Juan Manuel's unfortunate situation.
Amiga mia, thank you so much,
Juan Manuel said. You'll be safe until 9 tomorrow morning, when Cheryl arrives. It was then that I noticed the angry marks on his wrist, round and red. What are those? I asked. Did you burn yourself?
Oh, yes, I burned myself on the washer, yes.
That sounds like a safety infraction, I said. Mr. Snow is very serious about safety.
No, Juan Manuel replied. It was my mistake.
He did not make eye contact with me during this part of the conversation. I concluded he was embarrassed, so I changed the subject. Have you heard from your family lately? I asked.
My mother sent me this yesterday.
He pulled a phone from his apron pocket and called up a photo. His family lives in northern Mexico. He has 4 sisters, 2 brothers, 6 aunts, 7 uncles, and 1 nephew. The photo showed the entire family seated around a plastic table, all of them smiling for the camera.
This is why I am here, in this kitchen, in this country, so my family can eat meat on Sundays. If my mother met you, Molly, she'd like you right away.
It was time to go to the social, the restaurant, bar, and grill inside the hotel, where Rodney would be starting his shift. Rodney Stiles, head bartender. Rodney, with his thick wavy hair, his white dress shirt with the top buttons tastefully undone, revealing just a little of his perfectly smooth chest. Rodney was behind the bar, reading a newspaper spread on the bar top. I walked in briskly to show that I am a woman with confidence. He looked up.
Oh, hey, Molly. Here for the morning papers. Have you seen this?
I looked at the headline. Family Feud Rocks Black Empire.
Looks like trouble's brewing in the Black family. Seems his daughter, Victoria, is 49% shareholder of the Black business empire, and he wants those shares back.
I scanned the article. The Blacks had 3 children. One of the boys lived in Atlantic City. The other flitted from Thailand to the Virgin Islands. In the article, the first Mrs. Black described her 2 sons as flakes and was quoted saying, "The only way Black properties and investments will survive is if my daughter, Victoria, becomes a half shareholder, at least." The article went on to describe the nasty legal jabs between Mr. Black and his ex-missus. It suggested that Mr. Black's second marriage to Giselle 2 years ago, a woman less than half his age, marked the beginning of destabilization within the Black Empire. "Poor Giselle," I said aloud.
"Right?" Rodney replied. "She doesn't need this."
An unlikely and pleasing bond had recently formed between Giselle Black and me, Molly, insignificant roommate.
"Molly, your newspapers."
Rodney leaned on the bar, the muscles in his forearms contracting attractively. Since this was a bar and not a dinner table, the no elbows on the table rule did not apply.
"And Molly, by the way, thanks for what you're doing to help my friend Juan Manuel. You're really a special girl."
I felt a surge of warmth rush to my cheeks, as if Gran had just pinched them. "I'd do the same for you. Probably more. I mean, that's what you do for friends, right?" He put one of his hands on my wrist and subtly squeezed. The sensation was extremely pleasing. He pulled away long before I was ready. I waited for him to say something more, to ask me on another date, perhaps. Our first occurred well over 1 year ago, and remains a highlight of my adult life. But I waited in vain. He turned to the coffee station and began making a fresh pot. "Speaking with you has been delightful," I said to Rodney. "Perhaps we can do it another time."
"You bet," he said. "I'm here all week."
"Of course you are," I said.
"It was a joke,"
he replied with a wink. Though I did not get the joke, I most definitely understood the wink. I floated out of the bar and collected my trolley. I could hear my heart in my ears, the excitement pumping. This morning, I carried a happy tune in my head as I took the elevator up to the 4th floor. I headed to Mr. and Mrs. Black's suite. Just as I was about to knock on their door, it opened, and Mr. Black stormed out. He was dressed in his trademark double-breasted suit, with a paper sticking out of his left breast pocket. On it, the word deed. I stuck my foot in the door to keep it open, then decided I should still knock. "Housekeeping!" I called. Giselle was seated on the divan in the sitting room, wearing a bathrobe, her head in her hands. She looked up. Her face was red, her eyes swollen. She ran to the bathroom, slamming the door behind her. She switched on the fan, which, I noted, sounded loud and clunky. Next, she turned on the shower. "Well then," I called loudly through the bathroom door, "if you don't mind, I'll just tidy up in here while you prepare yourself to seize the day." No answer. It was unlike Giselle to behave in this manner. She was usually quite talkative whenever I cleaned her suite. I busied myself with cleaning, starting in the sitting room. The glass tabletop was a mess of smudges and fingerprints. I surveyed the room. The curtains were open. On the bureau by the door were some envelopes, opened. Beside the correspondence was Giselle's yellow purse with the gold chain-link strap. The zipper at the top was open, and sticking out was a flight itinerary. I'm not one to snoop, but I couldn't help but notice it was for 2 one-way flights to the Cayman Islands. After vacuuming, I moved on to the bedroom. The bed was rumpled. No tip on the pillows, which was a disappointment. I will admit that I've come to count on the generous tips from the Blacks, now that I'm a one-salary household, and can't count on Grand's earnings to help pay the rent. I set about removing the bedsheets, and crisply made up the bed, complete with perfect hospital corners and 4 plump hotel-standard pillows. The closet door was ajar, but when I went to shut it, I couldn't, because the safe inside was open. I could see 1 passport inside the safe. Not 2. Some documents, and several stacks of money. I heard the shower turn off, at long last, and the fan as well. And then I heard the unmistakable sound of Giselle sobbing. She sounded very sad. So, I announced that the suite was clean, took a tissue box from my trolley, and waited outside the bathroom door. Eventually, she emerged. I held the tissue box out to her. "Need a tissue for your issue?" I asked. She sighed. "You're sweet, but a tissue isn't going to cut it." "Very well," I said in a chipper voice. "May I clean your bathroom now?" "No, Molly. I'm sorry. Please, not right now." I did not take this personally. "I'll come back later to clean it then?" "Good idea." I set about cleaning the other rooms and suites on that floor, feeling increasingly unsettled as I did so. What was wrong with Giselle? Normally, she talked about where she was going that day, what she was doing. She solicited my opinion about whether she should wear this or that. It was also unlike Giselle to forget to tip me. I hear footsteps coming down the hallway towards Mr. Snow's office, where I remain obediently seated. Mr. Snow steps in. "Molly, thank you for waiting. You've been very patient." It's only then that I realize there is someone behind him, a figure in dark blue. The figure steps forward. It's a police officer, a female. She's large, imposing, with broad athletic shoulders. There's something about her eyes that I do not like. "Molly, this is Detective Stark. Detective, this is Molly Gray. She's the one who found Mr. Black." "What an awful day for you," the detective says. Her voice is not without warmth. "Oh, it wasn't all awful," I say. "I've just been running through it in my mind, It was actually mostly pleasant, until approximately 3 o'clock. The detective looks at Mr. Snow.
Molly, Mr. Snow says, the detective would like to talk to you as a witness. Perhaps there are details you noticed about the scene or about the day that would be helpful to the investigation.
The investigation, I say. Do you presume to know how Mr. Black died? Detective Stark clears her throat.
I presume nothing at this point.
How very sensible, I say. So you don't think that Mr. Black was murdered? Detective Stark's eyes open wide.
Well, it's more likely he died of a heart attack. At this point, we don't know anything for sure. We'll be doing a thorough investigation to rule out foul play.
This puts me in mind of a very funny joke that Gran used to tell. What do you call a poor rendition of Hamlet performed by chickens?
Foul play. I smile at the recollection.
Molly, says Mr. Snow, do you realize the gravity of the situation?
His eyebrows knit together.
And then I realize what I've done. How my smile has been misinterpreted. My apologies, sir. I was thinking of a joke. The detective uncrosses her arms and places both hands squarely on her hips.
I'd like to bring you down to the station, Molly, to take your witness statement.
Where shall I take my soiled teacup, Mr. Snow? I'm happy to return it to the kitchen. Never leave a mess to be discovered by a guest. I'm quoting from Mr. Snow's most recent professional development seminar. But alas, he doesn't acknowledge my witty rejoinder.
Don't worry about the cup, he says.
And with that, the detective leads the way, ushering me out of Mr. Snow's office, through the illustrious front lobby of the Regency Grand Hotel, and out the service door.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Molly found a dead body at the hotel where she works. She now finds herself under suspicion. This is episode 3 of The Maid by Nita Prose. I am in the police station, a small white room with only 2 chairs, a table, and a camera in the upper left corner, blinking a red light at me. While I have a great appreciation of bright white in decor and clothing, this style choice is definitely not working. White only works when the room is clean. This room is far from clean. I see dirt where others don't. The stains on the wall where a black briefcase likely grazed it. The coffee rings on the white table in front of me. 2 round brown O's. The gray thumbprints smeared around the doorknob. The geometric treads left on the floor from an officer's wet boots. Detective Stark clears her throat and sits in the chair across from mine. She has a yellow notepad and a Bic pen, the top chewed. I will my mind not to think about the universe of bacteria dwelling on the top of that pen. She leans back and looks at me in that penetrating way of hers.
I'd like to ask you what you saw when you entered the Black Suite this afternoon. Did you see anything unusual?
I consider what it is the detective really wants to know, and what I'm prepared to divulge. Detective, I say, the Black Suite was in its usual state of disarray. There wasn't much out of the ordinary, except the pills on the bedside table. I offer this up on purpose, because it's a detail that even the most nit-witted investigator would have noticed. What I don't want to discuss are the other things. The robe on the floor, the safe being open, the missing money, the flight itinerary, Giselle's purse being gone, and what I saw in that mirror. I've watched enough murder mysteries to know who the prime suspects tend to be. Wives often top the list, and the last thing I want is to cast any doubt on Giselle. She's blameless in all of this. And she's my friend.
We're looking into those pills, the detective says. When you arrived in the Black's room, did you go straight to the bedroom?
No, I say. That would be against protocols. First, I announced my arrival, thinking that perhaps someone was in the suite. As it turns out, I was 100% correct in that assumption. The detective looks at me and says nothing. You didn't write that down, I say.
Write what down?
What I just said. She gives me an unreadable look and jots down my words, smacking the pen against the pad when she's done.
So then what?
Well, when no one answered, I ventured into the sitting room, which was quite untidy. I walked into the bedroom and found Mr. Black in bed, as though he were resting. I explained how I approached Mr. Black's bedside, checked for breath, but found none, how I called down to reception for help. I tell her all of it, up to a point. She writes furiously now, occasionally pausing to look at me, putting that germ factory of a pen in her mouth as she does so.
Tell me something. Do you know Mr. Black very well?
No, I reply.
And Giselle Black? The detective asked.
I thought of Giselle, of all the times we'd conversed, of the intimacies we shared, hers and mine. I thought back to the very first time, many months ago, when I met Giselle. She was wearing a soft pink dressing gown, made of satin or silk. She reminded me of the starlets in the old black and white movies that Gran and I used to watch together in the evenings.
I'm Giselle Black, she said, offering me her hand. Call me Giselle. Sorry you have to clean this shithole every day. We're a bit of a mess, me and Charles. But it's nice to open the door and find everything all fresh after you've been here.
My work had been noticed, acknowledged, appreciated. For a moment, I wasn't invisible. I am at your service, Giselle, I said. She smiled then, a fulsome smile that reached all the way to her feline green eyes. Over the course of a year, we became quite close. She seemed to understand that I don't always know the right way to behave, or what to say.
Molly, you stand too close to people, you know that? You have to back off a bit, not get right in people's faces when you talk to them. Imagine your trolley is between you and the other person, unless it's, like, me or another close friend.
Another close friend. Little did she know, she was my one and only. Some days, while I was cleaning the suite, I got the sense that, despite being married to Mr. Black, she felt lonely and craved my company as much as I craved hers.
I envy you,
she said.
To have the guts to be fully independent. Charles and I? It looks so glamorous from the outside, but sometimes it's not. His ex-wife was here the other day. Do you know what she said to me? She said, "Leave him while you still can." The worst part is I know she's right. I deserve a Prince Charming, and I'll make that happen. Eventually.
Molly? It was Detective Stark. I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
I asked if you know Giselle Black. Did you ever have any dealings with her? Did she ever mention anything that might help our investigation?
Detective, I say. I am a hotel maid. Who would want to talk to me? She considers this, then nods. She is entirely satisfied with my response.
Thank you, Molly. It's been a tough day for you. Let me take you home.
With a turn of the key, I open the door to my apartment. Home sweet home. I look down at the pillow on Gran's antique chair by the door. She sewed the Serenity Prayer on it in needlepoint. I unlace my shoes and wipe the bottoms with a cloth before putting them away in the closet. Gran? I'm home! She's been gone for 9 months, but it still feels wrong not to call out to her, especially today. When she was alive, we spent all our free time together. In the evening, the first thing we'd do was complete that day's cleaning task. Then, we'd make dinner together. Spaghetti on Wednesdays, fish every Friday. We'd eat our meals side by side on the sofa as we watched reruns of Columbo. My gran worked hard and cared for me well. My gran was also a maid, but a domestic one. When I was nearing the end of high school, Gran and I talked a lot about what I wanted to do in my adult life. There was only one option of any interest to me. I want to be a maid, I told her. Gran asked around, and through an old contact, who was a doorman at the Regency Grand, she learned of an opening for a maid at the hotel. One day, I came back home from work, and something was different. I could see it in Gran's face. She looked puffy and strained.
"It seems I'm a bit sick," she said. "Let's have a seat."
I waited for her to speak.
"Molly, dear, I have a serious illness."
You do?
"Yes. I have pancreatic cancer."
When will the medicine take effect? I asked, but as she doled out the details, the truth began to sink in. Palliative. Such an operatic word. So lovely to say. And so hard to contemplate. It can't be, Gran. You will get better. We simply have to clean up this mess.
Oh, Molly, some messes can't be cleaned. I've had such a good life. I have no complaints, except that I won't have more time with you. I hope that when my time comes, the good Lord takes me quickly, without too much pain. But if there is pain, I've got my prescription, and I have you. There is one thing you must promise me, she said. I will not go to the hospital under any circumstances. Do you understand?
I've been daydreaming and I didn't realize it. I'm standing by the front door of our apartment. I'm clutching Gran's Serenity pillow to my chest. I'm all alone. I will admit to having bad dreams last night. I eat quickly, then shower, and leave for work. I'm locking the apartment door behind me when I hear someone clearing their throat in the hallway. Mr. Rosso. I'm expecting the basic civility of a good morning. But all I get is, "Your rent's overdue. When will you pay up?" The rent will be paid in a few days' time, and at that point, I will make good on every penny I owe you. You'd better, he says, then shuffles back to his apartment. In the front lobby, I see Mr. Snow. He steps away from the reception desk and the smartly uniformed penguins manning it. Gaggles of guests are roaming the lobby, and I suspect that Mr. Black may be the topic on the tip of many tongues. Mr. Snow gestures to an emerald settee in a shadowy corner by the grand staircase. It's the first time I've ever sat on one of these settees. Mr. Snow perches beside me and speaks in a whisper. Giselle is still staying here at the hotel, but you're not to pass that along. She has nowhere else to go, do you understand? I've moved her to the second floor. Sunitha will clean her room from now on. I feel a nervous flutter in my stomach. Very well, I say. One more thing, Molly. The Black Suite? It's out of bounds today, obviously. The police are still conducting their investigation in the room. So, when should I clean that suite? Mr. Snow stares at me for a long time. You're not to clean it, Molly. That's what I'm trying to tell you. I make it to the kitchen, where Juan Manuel is scraping the remnants of breakfasts into a large garbage can and putting plates into the industrial dishwasher. As soon as he sees me, he puts down the spray nozzle and eyes me with concern. I am glad to see you. Are you okay? I've been worried about you, Miss Molly. That man, Mr. Black, he was powerful. Too powerful. Who will be the boss now? The boss is Mr. Snow, I say. He looks at me strangely.
Is he? Is he really?
Yes, I reply with utmost confidence. Mr. Snow is most definitely the boss. Now, I really need to get to work. Today, I'll make some new arrangements for tonight. I've just heard that the 4th floor is under surveillance. I need you to stay in room 202 tonight, okay? To avoid the police.
Okay. Don't worry, I'll stay clear.
And Juan Manuel, I shouldn't be telling you this, but Giselle Black is staying somewhere on the same floor. So be careful. You have to keep a low profile until this investigation is over. Understood?
Yes, Molly. Understood. You need to keep a low profile too, okay? I worry about you.
Then I exit the kitchen and wheel my trolley to the service elevator, and I ride up to the lobby, where I'll retrieve my daily stack of papers from the social. Even from afar, I can spot Rodney behind the bar. When he sees me, he rushes out to greet me.
Molly, you're here!
He puts his hands on my shoulders. I feel them like electricity, warming me to my core.
Are you all right?
I'm all right, I say. Perhaps a hug would not be too much to ask of you?
Of course.
He folds me into his chest. I rest my head on his shoulder and take in the scent of him.
I heard you found Mr. Black yesterday, and that they took you to the cop shop to ask you questions. I can't talk now, but why don't you come by after your shift? We can grab a quiet booth and you can tell me everything. Every last detail.
He reaches for my hand and squeezes it in his. His eyes are deep pools of blue. He is concerned. For a moment, I wonder if he's going to kiss me. But then I realize how daft that is. Kissing a fellow employee in the middle of the bar and grill. Of course he wouldn't do that. It would be lovely to meet you later, I say, aiming for coy nonchalance. So, 5 p.m.? Sharp? Is this a date?
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
The Maid, by Nita Prose. Episode 4. Molly believes she has a date with bartender Rodney. She's excited, and her mind turns to her first romantic encounter with him. It had been well over 1 year since Rodney and I went on our last date. Today, as I clean, I replay the day our affection was cemented. I had entered room 305, which the front desk had told me was vacant and needed to be cleaned. When I pushed through the door with my trolley, I came face to face with 2 very imposing men. My sincerest apologies, sirs. I was told that all of the guests in this room had vacated. I smiled then, as per protocol, and waited for the gentleman to respond, but neither said a word. There was a navy blue duffel bag on the bed. One of the giants had been packing away a piece of equipment when I intruded. Some kind of machine or scale? Now he stood stock still. Just when I was feeling slightly uncomfortable, 2 people stepped out of the bathroom. One was Rodney, in his crisp white shirt. The other was Juan Manuel.
Molly, no, why are you here?
Juan Manuel asked.
Please, you need to leave right away.
Molly, Rodney said, what are you doing here? Isn't it obvious? I'm here to clean the room. Rodney got right in front of me. In a low voice, he said,
You weren't supposed to see any of this.
See what? I asked. The colossal mess all of you have made? One of the behemoths spoke up then.
Lady, we've just cleaned everything up good.
Well, you've done a substandard job. Who ate powdered donuts without a plate? No one spoke. It was Rodney who broke the silence. He turned his back on me and addressed his friends.
Molly is She's a very special girl. You can see that, right? How she's unique.
The two men glanced at each other and nodded.
Molly,
Rodney said.
you just do your job like you usually do, okay? Leave this place spotless and keep quiet about it.
Of course. Rodney came in close to me.
Thank you, he whispered. Let's meet up tonight, okay? I'll explain everything.
I could barely believe my ears. I would love that, I said. So it's a date?
Sure. Yeah. Meet me in the lobby at 6.
That night, at exactly 6, I showed up in the hotel lobby. Rodney approached. His eyes darted about the room.
Let's get out of here, okay? We can go to the Olive Garden down the street.
I could not believe it. The Olive Garden is my very favorite restaurant. We were meant to be. A helpful young waitress seated us in a perfectly romantic booth, tucked to one side. Rodney rested his elbows on the table, an etiquette faux pas that was forgivable, since it offered me a fine view of his forearms.
Molly, you're probably wondering what was going on today. With those men in that hotel room, I wanted a chance to explain.
The waitress returned with our drinks.
Those two men, they're Juan Manuel's friends, not mine. Do you understand?
I think that's lovely, I said. I'm glad he's made some friends here. His entire family is in Mexico. I took a deep, delicious sip from my glass.
So here's the thing you probably don't know,
Rodney said.
Juan Manuel's actually not a documented immigrant. His work permit ran out a while back. Mr. Snow doesn't know that. If Juan Manuel were caught, he'd be kicked out of the country and would never be able to send money home again. You know how important his family is to him, right?
I do.
So those two men you saw in that room, that bag they had, that was Juan Manuel's bag. Juan Manuel's landlord kicked him out of his apartment a while back. Now he has nowhere to live. I've been helping him sort things out. All of this is a secret, Molly. Are you good at keeping secrets?
He locked eyes with me, and I felt the great privilege of being his confidant. Of course I can keep a secret, I said, as I mimed locking a box on my chest.
Cool. So there's more. Every night, I've secretly been putting Juan Manuel up in a different room so that he doesn't have to sleep on the streets. But if anyone found out what I was doing,
you'd be in a lot of trouble. And Juan Manuel would be homeless, I said.
Exactly.
Yet again, Rodney was proving what a good man he was. I was at a loss for words. Fortunately, the waitress returned and filled the silence with my tour of Italy platter and Rodney's spaghetti and meatballs. I had a few extremely satisfying mouthfuls, then put my fork down. Rodney, you're a fine man. Rodney's mouth bulged with a meatball.
I try,
he said.
But I could use your help, Molly. It's getting harder for me to know which hotel rooms are vacant. It would be amazing if you could tell me which rooms are empty on any given night, and if you could clean it before and after Juan Manuel and his friends stay there.
I would be delighted to help you, I said. He put his fork down and reached for my hand. The sensation was pleasingly electric.
I knew I could count on you, Molly, he said.
Playing over our first date in my mind has amplified my anticipation for our date tonight. At 5 to 5, I'm downstairs in front of the social, waiting by the "Please be seated" sign, looking around for Rodney. He sees me, comes right to my side. We walk through the restaurant to the most secluded and romantic booth at the back. He looks around the room, then at me.
Listen, I'm really sorry about what happened to you yesterday. That must have been intense.
Today is going much better, especially now.
So, tell me, when you were with the cops, I hope nothing about Juan Manuel came up?
This is a perplexing line of inquiry. No, I say. That has nothing to do with Mr. Black.
Right. Of course it doesn't. But you know, cops can be nosy.
He reaches into his back pocket and takes out his phone.
Molly, take my number.
A frisson of excitement flitters through me.
If anything happens, like the police bother you again or ask too many questions, you just let me know. I'll be there for you.
When I write my name in his phone, I add a heart emoji at the end, as a declaration of amorous intent. I'm hoping he'll look at my entry and see the heart. But he doesn't.
Listen, I've got to go,
Rodney says.
You'll call if anything comes up?
I will, I say. I walk home briskly, full of energy and butterflies from my time with Rodney. As I approach my building, I notice a familiar figure standing outside the front doors. For a moment, I'm sure I'm hallucinating. But as I get closer, I see it really is her. She's wearing her large dark sunglasses and carrying her pretty yellow purse. Giselle? I say as I approach.
Oh, thank God. Molly, I'm so glad to see you. Can I come in?
Of course, I say. I feel the butterflies in my stomach. I'm sorry, I say. I don't have company very often. Or ever. I don't tell her that she's the first guest to pass through the door in 9 months. She's also the first guest I've ever entertained on my own. Something occurs to me. My gran always said, a good cup of tea will cure all ills. And if it doesn't, have another. Would you like one?
Sure, she says. Can't remember the last time I had tea.
Giselle sits down on the part of the sofa where the springs poke through a tad, though Gran has covered them with a crocheted blanket. I sit beside her.
Listen, I know you're probably wondering why I'm here.
I watch her carefully. I remember the day she told me about Mr. Black's mistresses. How she was so angry she really did want to kill him. But thought and action are different things entirely. If anyone knows this, I do.
The police think I killed my own husband,
she says. For what it's worth, I know you didn't.
Thank you, Molly.
I take a sip of tea. Your husband was a cheater, I say. She nods.
When I met Charles, I thought I'd finally found someone who would look after me. Things were okay for a while, until they weren't. And yesterday we had a huge fight right before you came in to clean. I told him I was sick of our life, sick of going from hotel to hotel, all for his business. I said, why can't we just settle down somewhere, like at the villa in the Caymans, and just live and enjoy life? People don't know this, but when we got married, Charles made me sign a prenup, so none of his properties or assets belonged to me. Yesterday, I asked if he would consider canceling our prenup, or at least putting the Cayman villa in my name. I told him, you can keep growing your business, your black empire, but at least give me the deed to the villa. A place to call my own. A home.
I think back to the itinerary I saw in her purse. If the trip was for her and Mr. Black, why were the flights one way?
He lost it on me when I said the word home. He said, everyone always lies to him, tries to steal his money. He was drunk, storming around the room saying I was just like his ex-wife. He got so mad that he pulled off his wedding ring and threw it across the room. He said, fine, have it your way. Then he opened the safe, stuffed some papers in his suit pocket, and stormed out.
I knew what that paper was. I'd seen it in his pocket. The deed to the villa in the Caymans. Giselle turns to face me and sits cross-legged on the couch. She wraps Gran's blanket around her legs.
Molly, did you tell the police anything about Charles and me?
No, I say.
Did you tell them anything about me?
I did not hide the truth, I say. But I also didn't volunteer it. Giselle stares at me for a second, then leaps forward and hugs me, which catches me off guard.
Molly, you're a very special person, you know?
Yes, I know, I say.
I don't think I could ever be as good as you, so long as I live.
She pulls back from me and springs to her feet. What are you going to do, now that Mr. Black is dead?
Not much, she says. The police won't let me go anywhere until the toxicology and autopsy reports are complete. Because if some rich guy turns up dead, then obviously his wife offed him, right?
She pauses, looks at me.
Will you look after me? At the hotel, I mean. Will you be my maid? You're like a sister to me. You know that? A sister who sometimes says crazy shit and likes dusting way too much. But a sister nonetheless.
I'd be honored to look after you, I say, if Mr. Snow is fine with it. She stands, walks to the door, and grabs her yellow purse. She brings it back to the sofa and takes out a stack of bills, a stack that looks all too familiar. She flicks off 2 crisp $100 bills and places them on Gran's silver tea tray.
For you. You earned it.
What? This is a lot of money, Giselle.
I never tipped you yesterday. Consider this your tip. One more thing, Molly. I've got a favor to ask of you.
I immediately wonder if this will involve ironing or laundry, so I'm surprised by what comes next.
Do you think you might be able to get into our suite still? It's cordoned off right now, but I left something in there. Something I desperately need back. I tucked it up in the bathroom fan.
That explains it. The clunky sound I heard yesterday when she was in the bathroom, showering. What is it you want me to retrieve?
My gun,
she says.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Molly is in demand. Giselle has asked Molly to do her a big favor, and Rodney has asked her to keep his secrets. This is episode 5 of an abridged version of The Maid by Nita Prose. My alarm clock rings the next morning. I check my phone just in case Rodney texted me overnight. Messages? Nil. No matter. I will go to work today. I will see Rodney there. I will move things forward. I will help Giselle because she's a friend who needs me. Out the front door and down the hall to Mr. Rosso's apartment.
Molly,
he says.
It's 7:30 a.m. This better be good.
I'm holding the money in my hand. Mr. Rosso, here's $200 toward the rent. He sighs and shakes his head.
The rent is $1,800 and you know it.
Yes, you are correct, both about the amount that I owe and the fact that I know it. And I'll produce the rest of the rent by the end of today. You have my word. I arrive at work well before 9. Mr. Preston smiles when he sees me.
Good morning, Miss Molly. Are you all right?
I'm quite fine, I say. Mr. Preston clears his throat.
You know, Molly, if you ever have any problems, you can count on good old Mr. Preston for help.
I appreciate your offer, Mr. Preston. But I'm quite all right. Once I'm uniformed and I've replenished my trolley, I make my way to the main lobby. I see Mr. Snow at reception. He beckons me to him.
Molly, it's good to see you. Thank you again for coming to work yesterday. And today. Many employees would use recent events as an excuse to feign illness, to shirk their duties.
I would never do that, Mr. Snow. Every worker bee has her place in the hive. You taught me that.
Did I? Listen, Molly. The police are now finished with their investigation in the Black Suite. I hope they haven't uncovered anything unsavory.
If they have, I'll just clean it up. I'll get right to it, sir. I depart, heading for the social, to pick up the morning papers, and, hopefully, to see Rodney. He's behind the bar when I get there, polishing the brass taps. I feel a warm glow the instant I set eyes upon him. I come in close to the bar. You are not going to believe this, I say. Giselle came to see me, to my house. Can you believe it?
Huh. What a surprise,
he says, but his tone is odd.
We need to talk about Juan Manuel.
Guilt suddenly overcomes me. I'd all but forgotten about Juan Manuel. How can I help? I ask.
I hear the police are gone and that the Black Suite is empty. Is that right?
I can confirm that, I say. I'll be cleaning it first thing today.
That's perfect, Rodney says. I figure the safest place for Juan Manuel now is the Black Suite.
Once the suite is clean, I'll let you know and Juan Manuel can come in.
Great. Juan Manuel gave me his overnight bag. Would you mind putting it in the suite? Under the bed or something. I'll let him know it's there.
Of course, I say. Rodney retrieves the familiar navy blue duffel bag from beside a beer keg and passes it to me.
Thanks, Molly, he says. Man, I wish all women were like you. Most are much more complicated.
After that deliriously delicious encounter, I head upstairs. I'm practically floating on air. But as soon as I'm outside the Black Suite, the gravity of memory pins me to the ground. I breathe in and out, gathering the strength to enter. I use my key card to buzz through. As I survey the scene before me, I see that all of the drawers in every piece of furniture are open. The living room table has been dusted for fingerprints, and left like that. Prints in flagrante. A coil of caustic yellow caution tape lies abandoned on the floor outside the bedroom door. I hustle back to my trolley and put on my rubber gloves. I spritz disinfectant on the glass tabletops, the windows, the furniture. I wipe off all the prints. I make the bed, letting the crisp sheets billow down. My hands tremble as I polish the gilt mirror that faces the bed. I wipe and wipe until the perfect image of myself shines back at me. There is only one corner of the Black's bedroom left to clean. The dark corner beside Giselle's armoire. I take my vacuum and run over and over the carpet there. I inspect the walls closely, giving both walls a thorough wipe down with disinfectant. I have avoided the bathroom, but I can no longer. I spritz and spray, I polish and replenish. I flip the switch for the fan and hear that familiar clunking sound. I turn it off quickly. I grab the small step stool from my trolley and set it up under the fan. The fan cover pulls down easily. I reach one arm up into the dark recess until my fingertips connect with cold metal. Giselle's gun. Never in my life have I held anything like this. It feels alive, though I know it's not. What will I do with it? How will I get it to Giselle? Then it comes to me. They say television is an idle pursuit, but I maintain that I've learned many a lesson from Columbo. Hidden in plain sight. I go back to my trolley. I remove Juan Manuel's duffel bag. I slide it under the bed. Then I turn to my vacuum cleaner. I unzip the vacuum bag and take out the dirty filter. I grab a brand new filter from my trolley and slip the gun inside. I push the fresh filter into the guts of my vacuum. I zip it up. I pick up the dirty filter and I'm about to toss it into my rubbish bin when a dusty clump falls out and lands with a dull thud on the carpet. In the middle of the nest of dirt, something gleams. I crouch and take the object into my hand. Gold, thick, encrusted in diamonds and other jewels. A ring. Mr. Black's wedding ring. Right there in the palm of my hand. I push my trolley to the elevator. 3 times the doors open and guests stare out at me, not making the slightest move to allow me to enter. The maid goes last. Finally, the doors open and the elevator is empty. I have it to myself all the way down to the basement. I almost collide with Cheryl as I turn toward my locker. "Where are you off to in such a rush?" she asks. "I have an errand to run over the lunch hour." "An errand?" Cheryl says. "How will you maintain your A+ exceptional productivity score if you're running all over the place at lunchtime?" "Cheryl," I say, "I am aware of my legal right to take a break and will do so today. Is that acceptable? Or should I run it by Mr. Snow?" No. It's fine. I'd never suggest anything illegal. Just be back by 1 p.m. I'm standing outside a storefront, a few blocks away from the hotel. I already went in the store. I showed the man behind the counter the goods. He offered me a price. I accepted. In the cup of my brassiere, there is now a thick wad of bills wrapped in tissue. I check the time on my phone. My stomach twists, like the dragon that resides there just flipped its tail and sent acid sloshing everywhere. Maybe I shouldn't have done this. Maybe it was wrong. I catch my reflection in the glass. I remember Mr. Black's sallow, downturned face. The pain he has caused. The monster in my belly curls into a tight ball and lies down. What's done is done. I walk briskly the entire way back to the hotel. Mr. Preston is alone at his doorman's podium. When he sees me approaching, he steps out from behind it. "Molly," he says, his voice a tense whisper. "Go home." "Are you quite all right, Mr. Preston?" Through the glass of the revolving doors, I can make out Mr. Snow, and beside him, a looming, shadowy figure. Detective Stark. I push through the doors. Before I can take more than one step into the lobby, Mr. Snow and Detective Stark block my path. I see Cheryl out the corner of my eye. I look to Mr. Snow. Beads of sweat have formed at his temples.
"Molly, the detective is taking you back to the station for more questioning."
We are at the station in what feels like seconds. The same white room. Detective Stark leans forward and puts her elbows on the scuffed white table between us. I wish she wouldn't. I disapprove of elbows on the table. But I don't say anything.
"I'd like to share with you the results of Mr. Black's toxicology report. No autopsy report yet, but we'll have that soon enough. Mr. Black had drugs in his system. The same drug that was on his bedside table and strewn on the floor of his bedroom."
"Giselle's medicine," I say.
"Medicine? Benzodiazepine, laced with some other street drugs. Anyhow," Detective Stark says, "wasn't the pills that killed him."
"What do you believe killed him then?" I ask.
"We don't know yet. But I assure you, we'll get to the bottom of it."
Detective Stark purses her lips, bides her time. Eventually, she says,
"Does it ever make you angry? Being a maid, I mean. Cleaning up after rich people, taking care of their messes?"
This is not what I was expecting at all. "Yes," I answer truthfully. "I do sometimes feel angry, especially when guests forget that their actions have impact on others, when I'm treated like I don't matter." Detective Stark says nothing. Her elbows remain on the table, which continues to grate on my nerves. "Does it ever bother you?" I say.
"Does what ever bother me?"
"Cleaning up after rich people, taking care of their messes." The detective pulls back, as though I've sprouted the head of Hydra.
"Is that how you see this? That my job as a detective is to clean up after a man has died?"
What I'm saying is that we're not so different. When it comes down to it, you want this mess cleaned up, and so do I. We both seek a tidy closure to this unfortunate situation.
"What I'm seeking is the truth, Molly, about how Mr. Black died. And right now, I also want to know the truth about you. When we spoke the other day, you said you didn't know Giselle Black particularly well. But as it turns out, that's not true. We've been talking to Cheryl, your supervisor."
"I do hope she was helpful," I reply, though I highly doubt she was.
"We asked Cheryl if she ever cleaned the Black suite when they stayed at the hotel. She said that, for a while, she did clean their suite alongside you. It was her way of maintaining quality control."
The acid builds in my stomach. It was her way of siphoning off tips that were meant for those who do the work rather than for those who stand around watching, I say. The detective ignores my words entirely.
"Cheryl said that she observed a friendly relationship between you and Giselle. A kind of special kinship that was unusual between a guest and a maid. Especially for you, since you don't really have friends. So I'm told. I'm going to ask you one more time. Are you in contact with Giselle Black?"
I deliberate once more and find that I'm able to answer this with 100% honesty. I am not currently in contact with Giselle, though, as I understand it, she remains a guest at the hotel.
Let's hope for your sake that's the truth. And let's hope the autopsy report shows a natural cause of death. Until then, you're not to leave the country or attempt to hide from us in any way. You're not under arrest.
I most certainly hope not. I've done nothing wrong.
Do you have a valid passport?
No. Her eyes drill into mine.
Whatever it is you're hiding, whoever you're trying to protect, we'll find out. One thing I've learned in my business is that you can hide dirt for a while, but at some point, it all comes to the surface. Do you understand?
Yes, Detective. I understand dirt better than most.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Detective Stark has Molly in her sights, believing she is involved in the murder of Mr. Black. In episode 6 of The Maid by Nita Prose, the net tightens.
It is 3:30 when Detective Stark dismisses me from the White Room. I haven't eaten since the morning. I have to pause a moment on the sidewalk in front of my building just to keep from fainting. It's my deception, not hunger, that's having a deleterious effect on my nerves. The fact that I haven't disclosed fully about Giselle, nor about what I have hidden over my heart. I cross the street and enter my building, heading straight for Mr. Rosso's door. I extricate the wad of bills I've placed by my heart. "Here's the rest of this month's rent," I say. I am a woman of my word. He takes the money and counts it. I go to my own entrance and turn the key. Home, exactly as I left it this morning. Neat, orderly, unnervingly quiet. I take a seat on the sofa in the living room to collect my thoughts. I know I must consider my next steps, but I find myself overwhelmed by the very thought of it all. Perhaps it is time to call for help. I dial Rodney.
Hello?
Hello, Rodney, I say. I hope I haven't caught you at an inopportune moment.
All good,
He says.
What's up? Everyone's talking, saying you're in trouble.
I'm sorry to report that the gossip may be correct.
What did the police want?
The truth, I say. About me. About Giselle. Mr. Black didn't die of an overdose. Not exactly.
Oh, thank God for that. What did he die of?
They don't know yet. But it's clear they suspect me. And maybe Giselle, too.
But you didn't tell them anything about her, did you?
Not much, I say.
And you didn't mention Juan Manuel or any of that, right?
What does he have to do with anything?
Nothing. Nothing. So, why are you calling me?
Rodney, I need help. My voice cracks. He goes quiet for a moment, then asks,
Did you kill Mr. Black?
No! Of course not! How could you even—
Sorry. So, how are you in trouble exactly?
Giselle. She had me go back into the suite because she'd left something behind. A gun. She wanted it back. And she's my friend, so I—
Jesus. So where's that gun now?
In my vacuum cleaner. By my locker. Oh, Rodney, I'm so sorry to involve you in all of this.
Don't worry, Molly. I'll take care of everything.
There's another spot of information, I say. Mr. Black's wedding ring. I found it in the suite. And, well, I took the ring to a pawn shop today so that I could pay my rent.
You what?
I've made a terrible mistake, I say. If the police find out I pawned Mr. Black's ring, it will appear as though I killed him for financial gain. Can you see that?
Absolutely I can,
says Rodney.
Wow. Leave everything to me.
The next morning, I hear knocking. I sit bolt upright in bed, my heart pounding in my chest. Coming, I say. An imposing young police officer is standing with his feet apart, blocking all the light. Behind him, Detective Stark.
Molly,
Detective Stark says, stepping in front of the young officer.
You're under arrest for the unlawful possession of a firearm, possession of drugs, and first-degree murder. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say may be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to consult an attorney before speaking to the police.
I sit in the wobbly chair behind the dirty white table, careful not to touch my back against the rest. The young officer walks in with a coffee in a dastardly styrofoam cup and a muffin on a paper plate. He puts this down on the table, then leaves. Detective Stark closes the door behind him. She hands me the styrofoam cup. It makes that horrific squeaky sound as I take it in my hand.
Look,
she says.
We believe you killed Mr. Black. Or you had something to do with it. The autopsy report has come in. It's definitive, Molly. It wasn't a heart attack. He was asphyxiated.
I jam a chunk of muffin into my mouth and concentrate on chewing. It's always good to chew every bite 10 to 20 times. Gran used to say it aids digestion. I begin counting in my head.
How many pillows do you leave on every bed that you make up at the hotel? Detective Stark asks.
I know the answer, obviously, but my mouth is full.
4,
the detective says before I'm ready to answer.
4 pillows are on every bed. I verified it with Mr. Snow. But there were only 3 pillows on Mr. Black's bed when I arrived at the scene of the crime. Where did the 4th pillow go, Molly?
6, 7, 8 chews. I swallow and am about to speak, but before I do, the detective slams both hands down on the table. "Molly," she barks. "I just insinuated that you murdered a man in cold blood with a pillow, and you're sitting there mindfully eating a muffin." I'm not used to being yelled at or accused of heinous crimes. I sip my coffee to settle my jangling nerves. Then I speak. I did not kill Mr. Black. And I most certainly didn't asphyxiate him with a pillow.
You lied to us, Molly, about your connection to Giselle. She told us you often engaged in personal conversations with her. She also said you took money from Mr. Black's wallet.
What? That's not what she meant. She meant took as in accepted. She gave the money to me. I look from the detective to the camera blinking in the corner of the room. It's too much information. I can't process it all. I gathered the detective has spoken to Giselle again. But it's impossible to believe that Giselle misrepresented me. She wouldn't do such a thing. Not to a friend. I make a quick decision. I do have one clarification to make, I say. It is true that Giselle confided in me, and that I considered her a friend. I am sorry for not making this entirely clear to you before. Detective Stark nods.
Is there anything else you decided to not make entirely clear?
Yes. In fact, there is. I'll have you know that Mr. Black was far from the fine VIP that everyone seems to think he was. Perhaps you should investigate his enemies. He was a very dangerous man.
Dangerous enough for you to tell Giselle that she'd be better off without him?
I never. But I stop right there. Because I did say this. I believed it then. And I believe it still. I fill my mouth with a chunk of muffin. It's a relief to have a legitimate reason not to speak.
Molly, we've spoken with many of your co-workers. Do you know how they describe you?
I shake my head.
They say you're a neat freak, a weirdo, and worse. They say they could totally picture you murdering someone.
Cheryl, of course. Only she would say such a heinous thing. I don't like speaking ill of people, I reply. But Cheryl Green cleans sinks with her toilet rag. And she steals tips. If she's capable of theft and hygiene crimes, how low would she go?
How low would you go, Molly? You stole Mr. Black's wedding ring and pawned it.
I didn't steal it. I found it. Who told you that?
Cheryl followed you all the way to the pawn shop. She knew you were up to something. We found the ring in the front window, Molly.
My pulse is pounding. I can't keep my mind focused. I should not have pawned that ring, I say. I applied the wrong rule in my head, the finders keepers rule, when I should have applied the do unto others rule. I regret that choice, but it doesn't make me a thief. Did you speak with Mr. Preston? I ask. He will vouch for me.
We did, actually. He said you were blameless. Interesting choice of words. And that we should dig for dirt elsewhere.
And have you spoken with Rodney?
The bartender at the social. As a matter of fact, I have. He said he thought you were, quote-unquote, more than capable of murder.
All of the energy that has kept my spine upright dissipates in an instant. When the detective speaks, her voice is softer than before.
Your fingerprints were all over the Black's suite.
Of course they were, I say. I cleaned that suite every day.
And did you also clean Mr. Black's neck? Because traces of your cleaning solution were found there too.
Because I checked his pulse before calling for help.
You had various plans for killing him, Molly. So why in the end did you choose asphyxiation, rather than the gun?
I will not look up. I will not.
We found the weapon in your vacuum cleaner.
I feel my insides twisting. The only other person who knew about both the ring and the gun was Rodney. I can't do it. I can't assemble the pieces in my mind.
We tested your housekeeping cart, Detective Stark says, and it tested positive for traces of cocaine. We know you're not the kingpin here, Molly. We believe that Giselle introduced you to Mr. Black, and that she groomed you to work for her husband. We believe you and Mr. Black were well acquainted, and that you were helping him hide the lucrative drug operation he was running through the hotel. Something must have gone wrong between the two of you. Maybe you got angry with him, and you retaliated by taking his life. Or maybe you were helping Giselle get out of a bad situation. Either way, you were involved.
The detective is droning on, but her voice sounds tinny, farther and farther away. I know I'm not thinking straight, and I don't know the proper rules of etiquette when one is accused of murder. Out of nowhere, I remember Columbo. You read me my rights earlier, I say, at the door of my home. You said I have the right to consult an attorney. In that case, I'd like one phone call, please.
Here,
the detective says. She drops my phone on the table with a clunk. I pick it up and press contacts. I search all 8 entries. I consider who is truly on my side and who might not be. The names swirl before my eyes. Then I choose and dial. I hear it ringing. Someone picks up. Mr. Preston, I say.
Molly? Are you all right?
Please pardon me for troubling you at such an inconvenient hour.
Dear girl, what's going on?
I look around the plain white room with the fluorescent light speeding down on me. Detective Stark eyes me with her ice-glazed stare. The truth is, Mr. Preston, I'm not quite all right. I've been arrested for murder. And more. I'm being held at the station nearest the hotel. And I hate to say this, but I could really use your help.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
At last, Molly finds a friend who can help her. This is episode 7 of The Maid by Nita Prose. Once I finish my call to Mr. Preston, Detective Stark holds out her hand. In truth, I do not know what for, so I grab my empty styrofoam cup and pass it to her.
Are you kidding me?
She says.
Now you think I'm your maid?
I most certainly do not. If she were anywhere near a half-decent maid, this room would not look as it does. A pig pen. Detective Stark takes my phone from my hand. She looks at her watch.
So, is there anything else you'd like to say while we're waiting for your lawyer?
My apologies, Detective. Please don't take my silence personally. I'm aware of my right to remain silent, and so I'll begin employing it immediately. After what seems like an unholy eternity, there's a loud knock at the door.
This should be interesting,
Detective Stark says, rising from her chair. It's Mr. Preston, in civilian dress. I've rarely seen him out of his doorman's cap and coat. There's a woman with him, dressed much more formally in a tailored navy suit, carrying a black leather briefcase. Her dark brown eyes immediately give away who she is, because they're so much like her father's. I stand to greet them. Mr. Preston, I say, barely able to contain my relief at seeing them. Thank you so much for coming. It's just that I've been accused of some terrible things.
Molly, I'm Charlotte,
Mr. Preston's daughter says, interrupting me.
It's my professional advice that you remain silent. Oh, and it's very nice to meet you. One of you better be an attorney or I'm gonna lose it,
Detective Stark says. Charlotte steps forward.
That would be me, Charlotte Preston, of Billings, Preston and Garcia, she says,
flicking a business card to the detective.
Molly, do you agree to be represented by me?
I don't say a word.
Molly? She prods.
Should I speak now?
My apologies. I wasn't clear. You can speak, just not anything relating to the charges Lane. Let me ask you again. Do you agree to be represented by me?
Oh, yes. That would be most helpful. I say. Can we discuss a payment plan at a more convenient time?
Please don't worry about payment right now, Charlotte says. I've arranged for you to have a bail hearing later this morning. If it all goes well, you'll be released this afternoon.
Really? I ask. Is it that simple? I'll be released and this will all be over? I look from her to Mr. Preston.
Hardly, Detective Stark says. Even if they get you off now, you'll still have to stand trial.
At long last, after many forms and formalities, I find myself sinking into the plush leather back seat of Charlotte Preston's luxury car. Mr. Preston turns around in the passenger seat.
Now, don't you worry, Molly, he says. Charlotte's going to help you out, pro bono, and we won't stop until everything's back to normal. Tickety-boo.
I don't know how any of this could have happened, I say. I'm not guilty of any of these charges.
We know that, Molly,
Mr. Preston says.
Life must be hard without your Gran. You know, she asked me to look out for you before she passed.
I look out the window through the tears that have formed in my eyes. Thank you for looking out for me, I say. My building comes into view, and I'm fairly certain that I've never been happier to see it. Once we're parked, we get out of the car, and I lead the way into the building. This way, I say, pointing to the stairwell.
No elevator?
Charlotte asks. I'm afraid not, I reply. We climb silently to my floor and are walking down the hall toward my apartment when Mr. Rosso emerges from his.
You, he says. They arrested you. I'm evicting you, you hear me?
Before I can answer, Charlotte steps past me and stands a few inches from Mr. Rosso's face. You're the slumlord? Landlord, I suppose? I'm Molly's lawyer. You do realize that this building is in violation of more than a few codes and bylaws, right? Any residential building over 5 stories has to have a working elevator. Mr. Rosso's face has turned bright red. I expect him to speak, but surprisingly, he does not. He merely nods, then backs away into his apartment, quietly closing the door behind him. Mr. Preston smiles at Charlotte.
That's my girl,
he says. I fumble for my keys and unlock my apartment door. Please, come in, I say. Mr. Preston and Charlotte elect to keep their shoes on, which is fine by me, given how grateful I am to them at this particular juncture in time.
Molly,
Mr. Preston says, putting a hand on my shoulder.
would it be all right if I went into the kitchen and prepared us all a pot of tea? You can go freshen up.
I enter the living room a few minutes later, feeling quite a lot better. The full tea service is expertly arranged on the table, in front of the sofa. Charlotte picks up the yellow pad of paper and a sleek gold pen she's placed on the floor beside her chair. So, Molly, have a seat. Are you ready to talk? I'll need you to tell me everything you know about the Blacks and why you think you stand accused of, well, many things. I start with a full description of what I saw the day I entered the Black suite and found him dead in his bed. I describe the drinks on the messy sitting room table, Giselle's spilled pill bottle, the discarded robe, the 3 pillows on the bed rather than 4. I start to shake as the memory returns.
I'm not sure that pillows and messiness are the details Charlotte's after here, Molly,
Mr. Preston says.
I think she's looking for details that might suggest foul play.
That's right, Charlotte adds. Such as the pills. You said the pills were Giselle's.
Did you touch them? Were they labeled?
No, I didn't touch them. Giselle called them her Ben's friends, or her chill pills. I believe Ben's is a medicine of some sort. Charlotte looks up from her pad. Ben's is short for benzodiazepine. It's a anti-anxiety med.
Small white pills?
A lovely shade of robin's egg blue, actually.
Huh,
says Charlotte.
So it was a street drug, not a prescription.
Dad, did you ever talk to Giselle?
Ever see any odd behavior from her? Odd behavior,
he says, taking a sip of tea.
Odd behavior is par for the course when you're a doorman at the Regency Grand. On the day that Mr. Black died, she left in a hurry and was crying. A week before, same thing. But that was after a visit from Victoria, Mr. Black's daughter, and his ex-wife, the first Mrs. Black.
I remember that day, I say. Giselle told me Victoria disliked her. Perhaps that's why Giselle was crying that day, Mr. Preston.
Tears in high drama were a rather regular occurrence for Giselle,
Mr. Preston says.
I suppose that's not surprising when you consider the man she married.
Molly, Charlotte says, can you tell me anything that might help me understand the drug and weapons charges against you? Giselle trusted me. She came to my house the day after Mr. Black died. I didn't tell the police about that. She was very upset. And she needed a favor from me. I obliged.
Oh, dear,
says Mr. Preston. Dad, Charlotte says. Then to me. What did she ask you to do? To remove the handgun she'd hidden in the suite, in the bathroom fan. Charlotte and Mr. Preston exchange a look.
But there weren't any gunshots heard, or even reports of wounds on Mr. Black's body,
Mr. Preston says. Asphyxiated, I say. That's what Detective Stark said. Charlotte's mouth falls open. Good to know, she says, and scribbles something on her yellow pad. So the gun wasn't the murder weapon. Did you return it to Giselle? I didn't get the chance. I hid it in my vacuum cleaner, expecting to give it to her later. Then at lunch, I left the hotel.
That's right,
Mr. Preston agrees.
I saw you rushing out the doors, and was wondering where you were off to in such a hurry.
I look down at the cup in my lap. Something niggles at my conscience. I found Mr. Black's wedding ring, I say, and I pawned it. I know that was wrong. It's just been very hard on my own to make ends meet financially. My gran, she'd be so ashamed of me. I can't bear to look up at either of them.
Dear girl,
Mr. Preston says.
Your gran understood money troubles better than most.
So you pawned the ring and then went back to work? Charlotte asks. Yes. And the police were waiting for you when you came back? Mr. Preston steps in.
That's correct, Charlotte. I was there.
Charlotte shifts her weight in the chair, crosses her legs. What about the drug charges? Do you understand how those came about? There were traces of cocaine on my maid's trolley. I have no idea how that's even possible. Let's go back to the gun, Charlotte says. How did the police find it in your vacuum cleaner? When the police talked to me yesterday, I was afraid. Very afraid. I went straight home and called Rodney.
He's the bartender at the social.
Mr. Preston adds for Charlotte's benefit.
Smarmy cretin. Write that down.
It hurts to hear Mr. Preston say it. I called Rodney, I say. I told him about the police questioning me, about Giselle, and the gun in my vacuum cleaner, and about the ring I'd found and pawned.
Let me guess. Rodney said he'd be all too happy to help a nice girl like you.
Something to that effect, I say. But Detective Stark said it was Cheryl, my supervisor, who followed me to the pawn shop. Maybe she's the culprit in all of this.
My dear Molly,
Mr. Preston says with a sigh.
Rodney used Cheryl to tip off the police. He likely used the gun and the ring in your possession to divert suspicion away from himself. He may very well be connected to the cocaine found on your cart, and to the murder of Mr. Black.
Dad, do you think there's actual drug running happening at the Regency Grand? No, I say definitively before he can answer. The Regency Grand is a clean establishment. Mr. Snow wouldn't have it any other way. The only other issue is Juan Manuel.
The dishwasher?
Mr. Preston asks. I explain everything. How Juan Manuel's work permit expired. How Rodney secretly lets him stay in empty hotel rooms. I explain the overnight bags I drop off, and how I clean up after Juan Manuel and his friends every morning. I'll admit, I say, I really don't know how so much dust can be tracked into a room in just one night. Charlotte puts her pen down and addresses her father.
Wow, Dad. What a fine establishment you work at.
Mr. Preston has his head in his hands and is shaking it back and forth.
I should have known, he says. The burn marks, the way he avoided me whenever I asked how he was doing.
It's only then that the jigsaw pieces connect in my mind. Rodney's behemoth friends, the dust, the parcels and overnight bags, the traces of cocaine on my trolley. Oh, my lord, I say. Juan Manuel. He's being abused and coerced.
He's being forced to cut drugs every night in the hotel,
Mr. Preston says.
And he's not the only one being used. They've been using you too, Molly.
I try to swallow the enormous lump that has formed in my throat. I see it all clearly. All of it. I haven't only been working as a maid, have I ask.
I'm afraid not, Charlotte replies. I'm sorry to say it, Molly, but you've also been working as a mule.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
The Maid by Nita Prose, Episode 8. With friends on her side, Molly starts putting plans into action to clear her name. About an hour ago, Charlotte and Mr. Preston decided to contact Juan Manuel. He is standing before me, wearing a pressed polo shirt, tucked into his neat jeans. His eyes are wide, and his breath is ragged, as though he climbed the stairs 2 by 2.
"Hello, Molly,"
he says.
"I can't believe it. I never, ever wanted trouble for you. If I could have..."
He stops mid-sentence, looking past me to Charlotte. She steps forward.
"I'm Charlotte, Molly's lawyer and Mr. Preston's daughter. Please, don't be afraid."
We all take our seats. Charlotte picks up the pad and pen by her chair.
"Well, we better get started. Juan Manuel, I believe my father filled you in about Molly's predicament,
and I believe you yourself are in a very challenging situation."
"Yes,"
he says.
"I am. When I needed my work permit extended, Mr. Rodney said, 'No problem.' He introduced me to his lawyer friend. And that lawyer friend took a lot of my money. But in the end, no permit. I complained to Rodney, and he told me he'd make sure Mr. Snow didn't find out. But then he said, 'You have to help me too, you know. You scratch my back, I scratch yours.'"
"What exactly did Rodney make you do?" Charlotte asks.
At night, after my shift in the kitchen, I'd sneak into whatever hotel room with the keycard Molly gave me. Molly, she'd leave my bag there for me. Mr. Rodney's drugs were inside. Cocaine, and some other things too. All night he made me work. Sometimes with Mr. Rodney's men. And we'd prepare the cocaine for sale.
"When you say he made you, what do you mean exactly?" Charlotte asks.
"He said he'd kill me. He said he would kill my family back home. Sometimes they burned me with cigars to punish me."
He holds out his arm. Charlotte turns to Juan Manuel. Was Rodney working for Mr. Black? Juan Manuel wipes the tears from his face.
"Mr. Rodney never said much about Mr. Black, but sometimes he took calls. He thinks I'm so stupid that I don't understand English. He'd set up meetings to give money to Mr. Black. Mr. Rodney never talked to me directly about Mr. Black, but I know he knows the wife, Mrs. Giselle."
"How do you know?" Charlotte asks. Juan Manuel takes out his phone from his pocket.
"Because I got him," he says. "How do you say in English, in flagrante delito?" "In flagrante?"
Mr. Preston offers.
"Like this,"
he says, and turns his phone around to show us a picture. It's Rodney and Giselle. They are kissing passionately. My heart feels sore and heavy as I stare at the photo, registering the details. Charlotte stands and paces the living room. It's becoming more and more clear that Giselle and Rodney had multiple reasons to want Mr. Black dead. "It wasn't Giselle," I say. "She didn't do it." Many skeptical eyes turn my way. "Oh, Molly? How do you know that?" Charlotte asks. "I do. I just do." Mr. Preston rises to his feet.
"I have an idea," he announces.
"Uh-oh," Charlotte replies. It took well over an hour to hash out the details. Together, we devised a trap that will hopefully result in Rodney being caught in flagrante again. But this time, in a different way entirely. The first step begins immediately, with me texting him. Juan Manuel, Mr. Preston, and Charlotte gather around me on the sofa, reading over my shoulder. "Rodney, we must meet, urgently. Mr. Black was murdered. I made revelations to the police of which you should be aware. I'm sincerely sorry." I squeeze my eyes shut and press the button. When I open my eyes a few seconds later, 3 circles appear in a new text box below my sent message. Rodney's message appears. "Molly, WTF. Meet me in 20 minutes at the OG."
"OG?"
Mr. Preston asks.
"What's that?"
"The Olive Garden," I say.
"Molly,"
Rodney says as he slides into the booth across from me.
"Let's make this quick, okay? Tell me everything."
"Well," I say as I conceal my shaking hands under the table. After the detective took me to the station, she told me Mr. Black was asphyxiated. I wait for this to sink in.
Whoa,
Rodney says.
And you're the obvious suspect.
In fact, I'm not. They're looking for someone else. These are the exact words Charlotte instructed me to say. Detective Stark said the persons of interest were most likely motivated by Mr. Black's will. Poor Giselle. Do you know that Mr. Black didn't leave her a thing?
What? But that can't be. I know for a fact it can't be.
Do you? I thought you weren't well acquainted with Giselle.
I'm not,
he says. He appears to be sweating, though it's not unduly warm in here.
But I know people who know her well. Didn't Mr. Black leave Giselle the villa in the Caymans?
I don't recall anything about a villa. I think the detective said almost everything goes to the first Mrs. Black and the children. Another tidbit doled out as planned.
You're telling me the police volunteered all this information to you?
Of course not, I say. People forget I'm there. I overheard all of this at the station.
And weren't the detectives concerned about the gun in your vacuum? I mean, I'm assuming that's why they nabbed you, right?
Yes. I simply explained whose gun it was and where I found it, I reply.
So you narked on Giselle, your friend?
He asks. I would never betray a true friend, I say. But there's something dreadful I have to tell you. It's why I called you here. Here it comes, the moment I've prepared for.
What is it?
He asks, barely able to keep the rage out of his voice. Once the issue of Giselle's gun was out of the bag, I suppose that's both literal and figurative in this case, the detective said they would sweep the former Black Suite again. I bring a napkin to my eyes as I try to gauge his response to this.
Go on, he says.
I said, "Oh, you can't do that. Juan Manuel is staying in that suite." And the detective asked, "Who's Juan Manuel?" And so I told them how Juan Manuel is your friend, and how you've been helping him because he has no work permit, and...
You mentioned me? To the detective?
Yes, I say. And I told him about the overnight bags and the cleaning up after Juan Manuel and your friends, and how good and kind you've all been. He takes his head in his hands.
Oh, Molly, what have you done?
I told the truth, I say. But I realize I've caused a bit of an issue for Juan Manuel. What if he's still in the Black Suite when they check it again? I'd hate for him to get in any kind of trouble. You'd hate that too, wouldn't you, Rodney? He nods vigorously.
I would. Yeah. I mean, we've got to make sure he's not in there when they check. And we've got to clean the room out fast before the police arrive. You know, so there's no traces of Juan Manuel.
My thoughts exactly. I smile at Rodney. But inside, I'm pouring a full kettle of boiling water onto his dirty, lying face.
So you'll do it?
He asks. Do what? I reply.
Sneak in and clean the suite. Now, before the cops get there.
He reaches out and grabs my hand. I want to wrench mine away, but I know I must not move. You know, I say, I'm not allowed to enter the hotel. But that doesn't mean you can't enter. What if I quickly sneak into the hotel, grab the right room key, and give it to you? You can then clean up the room yourself.
Okay. All right. You get me the suite key, I'll clean the room.
The suite key, toot sweet, I say. But he fails to register my cleverness. I put one foot in front of the other and climb the plush red stairs. Mr. Preston sees me. He picks up the hotel phone on his podium and makes a call. I can hear him sounding perfectly believable when he says,
Yes, urgently. She's here at the front door and she won't leave.
As planned, Mr. Preston is wearing white gloves. He usually wears these only on special occasions, but they'll come in handy today.
Molly,
He says loudly and brusquely.
what are you doing here? Going to have to ask you to leave.
He looks around to make sure people are watching. Though it feels so strange to do so, it's time to play my part, to draw even more attention my way. I have every right to be here, I call out in a confident, booming voice. I am an esteemed employee of this hotel, and... I stop short when Mr. Snow emerges from the revolving doors. Mr. Preston swiftly moves toward him.
I'll get security,
He tells Mr. Snow, then heads through the revolving doors. Mr. Snow rushes over to me.
Molly,
He says.
I'm sorry to inform you that you are no longer employed at the Regency Grand Hotel. You must leave immediately.
I breathe deeply and stick to my performance.
But you can't just fire me without cause. As you well know, there is cause, Molly,
Mr. Snow says.
We need you off these steps now.
I look around and see that more guests have gathered. They're all looking my way. For the next few minutes, I keep Mr. Snow engaged on the stairs, demanding explanations, talking at length about the added value of my devotion to hygiene. Come back, Mr. Preston, quickly, I think to myself. At long last, he walks briskly through the revolving doors and stands beside Mr. Snow.
I can't find security, sir,
He announces. I can't get her to leave, Mr. Snow replies.
Let me handle this,
Mr. Preston says. Mr. Snow nods and steps aside.
Molly, a word?
Mr. Preston gently pulls me aside, out of earshot. We both turn our backs to the curious crowd. Did it work? I whisper.
It did. I found Cheryl.
And then what? I ask.
I got what I wanted.
How? I ask.
I told her I knew she was stealing tips from the other maids. She got so flustered, she didn't even notice me pocketing her master keycard from her trolley. Not so much as a fingerprint left behind, either.
He adds, wiggling his white-fingered gloves.
Here,
He says, holding out one hand.
shake.
I take the cue and shake. When I do, I feel the master keycard transfer seamlessly into my palm.
You take good care, Molly,
He says in a voice loud enough for the entire neighborhood to hear.
You run home now. You have no place being here today.
He nods to Mr. Snow, and Mr. Snow nods back. Of course, Mr. Preston knows as well as I do that I cannot leave. Not yet. I'm about to start a whole new monologue about worker bees, when at long last, Rodney emerges and bounds down the steps toward me. I don't understand any of this, I shout. I'm a good maid. Rodney, you're just the person I wanted to see. Can you believe this? Mr. Snow approaches.
Rodney,
He says,
we're trying to explain to Miss Molly that she is no longer welcome at this hotel, but we're having a hard time delivering the message. I understand,
Rodney says.
Let me talk to her.
I'm pulled away again. Once we're out of earshot, Rodney says,
Did you get the key? There's no time to lose.
I discreetly pass him the card. He turns and starts up the stairs. Oh, Rodney, I say. He turns back, looks down at me. It really is remarkable, the lengths to which you'll go for a friend.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Charlotte and Mr. Preston help Molly face facts. and get her story straight in this 9th episode of an abridged version of The Maid by Nita Prose. I'm sitting at the coffee shop directly across from the hotel. I'm right by the window, so I have a perfect view of the entrance to the Regency Grand. My phone buzzes. It's a text from Charlotte. A thumbs up emoji. I take a sip of tea and hear cars coming to a screeching halt. Across the street, right in front of the hotel, are 4 dark cruisers. Several armed officers jump out of the vehicles and run up the stairs. I watch as Mr. Preston ushers them in. There's nothing to do except wait and hope, and make a call. This is the only part of the plan that I have kept to myself all this time. There are still some things that only I know. I call Giselle.
Oh my God, Molly! Is everything all right?
I don't have time for niceties. And I do believe this is one of the few situations in life when skipping the rules of etiquette is entirely appropriate. You lied to me, I say. Rodney's your boyfriend. There's a pause on the other end of the line.
Oh, Molly,
she says after a time.
I'm so sorry.
I can hear she is near tears. I thought we were friends.
We are friends,
she replies. You made me move your gun, I say.
I know. I shouldn't have gotten you involved in my mess. I was scared the police would find it and then everything would point to me. And I figured they'd never suspect you.
The police found your gun in my vacuum. Everything's pointing to me now, Giselle. I've been arrested on many charges, and I did not kill Mr. Black.
I know that, she says. But I didn't either, Molly.
I know, I say. Did you realize that Rodney would frame me?
Molly, I swear I didn't. And the stuff Rodney made you do, cleaning the rooms after his shipments, I had no idea. And I had nothing to do with Charles's murder. Rodney and I joked about it, sure. We even planned running away together.
The flight itinerary. 2 one-way tickets. To the Caymans, I say.
Yes, to the Caymans. That's why I asked Charles to put that property in my name. Rodney and I were going to start a new life. A better life. But I never actually thought. I didn't know Rodney could actually be capable of. It seems I'm an expert at trusting assholes.
It may be something we have in common, I say.
Yeah,
says Giselle.
But I'm not like them, Molly. Charles and Rodney. I'm not like them at all.
I hope it's true. I really do. It's time to put her to the test. Giselle, you need to listen to me, okay?
Okay,
she says, through sniffles. Can you get to the Cayman Islands?
Yeah, I have open tickets.
Do not contact Rodney. Do you understand? He doesn't care a jot about you, Giselle. He'll take you down too, at the first chance. If you are a friend, you will do this for me. Go now, Giselle. Run. She keeps talking, but I don't listen, because I've said everything I need to say. I hang up on her without another word. I take a deep breath, I wait, and I watch the hotel entrance. And then, there it is at last, what I've been waiting for. The police emerge through the revolving doors, with a man in front of them. Rodney. His white shirt sleeves rolled up, making it easy to see his lovely forearms in handcuffs. Trailing behind him is Detective Stark. She's carrying a navy blue duffel bag that I recognize immediately. I'm home, I call out. Juan Manuel rushes my way. Gum. I follow him to the kitchen, where he's laid out a spread. He's even laid Gran's black and white checkered tablecloth. "This looks so lovely, Juan Manuel," I managed to say. "We eat, you tell me everything," he says. There's a knock at the door. I feel my stomach sink. I force my legs to move. I unlock and open it. Charlotte and Mr. Preston are standing there, and behind them, Detective Stark. I brace myself against the doorframe.
"It's okay, Molly,"
Mr. Preston says.
"It's okay."
"The detective is here with good news," Charlotte adds. Mr. Preston clears his throat.
"Molly, would you be so kind as to invite us in?"
Mr. Preston offers Detective Stark a seat, and she obliges. "As you can imagine," I say, "I'm most curious to know what has transpired in the last few hours. I would most expressly appreciate knowing if I remain accused of murder."
"All charges against you are dropped,"
Detective Stark says. "All of them," Charlotte repeats. The words register in my head, but I don't quite believe them.
"Molly," Detective Stark says, "I'm here because we're going to need your help. When we entered the former Black Suite today, Rodney Stiles and 2 of his associates were inside. We've charged them with several drug-related offenses, possession of an illegal firearm, and threatening an officer."
"Threatening an officer?" I say.
"He pulled a handgun when the door of the suite opened. Same make and model as the one we found in your vacuum, Molly. We've also charged Rodney with the first-degree murder of Mr. Black. But to be perfectly honest, we're going to need your help to make that charge stick. There are still a few things we can't figure out."
"Such as?" Charlotte prompts.
"When we first went into the Black Suite the day you found him dead, Molly, there were no traces of Rodney's fingerprints anywhere. And traces of your cleaning solution were found on Mr. Black's neck."
"Because I checked his pulse. Because—" It occurs to me then. It's my fault. Everyone looks my way. When I clean a room, I leave it in a state of perfection. If Rodney ever entered that room and left prints behind, I would have wiped them away without even knowing it. I'm a good maid. Maybe too good.
"You may be right," Detective Stark says. "We're wondering if you know anything about Giselle Black's whereabouts. Seems she saw us ambush the hotel and took off in a real hurry. She left a note on Regency Grand Stationery."
"What did it say?" I ask.
"It said, 'Ask Molly the maid. She'll tell you. I didn't do it. Rodney and Charles equal BFFs.'"
"BFFs," I say. "Best friends forever," Charlotte offers. She's saying Rodney and Charles were accomplices.
"Molly, do you have any idea where she could be?"
"She'll appear when she's ready," I say.
"Let's hope,"
Detective Stark says. I imagine Giselle on a faraway white sand beach, clicking through news feeds on her phone and learning of Rodney's arrest. What will she do then? Will she reach out to the police? Or will she put it all behind her? Will she grift her way into another rich man's wallet, or will she actually grow and change? What happens now? I ask. For Juan Manuel. For me.
"Well," Detective Stark says, "you're free. All charges are dropped."
"But am I still fired?" I ask.
"No, Molly,"
Mr. Preston says.
"You won't lose your job."
"What about the trial?" I ask. "That won't be for a while," Charlotte replies.
"We'll prepare for it, and hopefully, by working with Detective Stark and her team, we'll be able to put Rodney behind bars for a long time."
"That seems appropriate," I say. "He's a liar, an abuser, and a cheat."
"He's also a murderer,"
Mr. Preston adds. I say nothing. At the doorway, I stand and wait as Charlotte and Mr. Preston put on their shoes. I'm not sure of the proper etiquette for saying goodbye to two people who have just saved you from life in prison.
"Well?"
Mr. Preston says.
"Give your old friend a hug."
I do as I'm told, and am surprised by the sensation. I feel like Goldilocks hugging Papa Bear. I hug Charlotte as well, and it feels like caressing the wing of a butterfly. They leave arm in arm, and I close the door behind them. Juan Manuel stands in the entryway, shifting from foot to foot.
"Are you sure, Molly, that you're okay with me staying here tonight?"
"Yes," I say, "just for tonight." The words that follow cascade out of my mouth. "You'll take my room, and I'll take Gran's room. I'll change the sheets right now." The room is exactly as I left it. Gran's Royal Dalton figurines dance statically in petticoats on her bureau. Her pillows are plump and wrinkle-free. "Oh, Gran," I say. I feel a tidal wave of grief so strong that it carries me to her bed. On the last day of her life, I sat with her. She was lying where I am now. I'd carried the chair by the front door, the one with her serenity pillow on it, and set it up beside her. Her pain was worse than ever. I tried yet again to convince her to go to the hospital, to no avail.
"Molly," she said, "it's time."
"Gran, I can't."
"Yes,"
she said.
"You promised."
I protested. I begged her, please, please let me call the hospital. She waited for my storm to pass, and when it did, she said it again.
"Make me a cup of tea. It's time."
I rushed to the kitchen and had her tea ready, in her favorite cup, in record time. I put a pillow underneath her so she was more upright, but no matter how gently I touched her, she moaned pitifully.
"My pills," she said. "Whatever's left of them."
"It won't work, Gran," I said. "There aren't enough. Next week we'll have more." I begged her yet again. I pleaded. In the end, I relented. I emptied the painkillers into her tea. 4 pills. That's all. Not enough. Even as I fed her the liquid, I begged, "Don't drink. Don't." But she did. She drank the whole thing.
"Delightful,"
she whispered when she was done.
"I love you, my dear girl,"
she said.
"You know what to do."
"Gran," I said, "I can't." But I could see it. I could see her body stiffen, the pain seizing her once more. Her breathing became even more shallow, and the rattle was louder, like a drum. We'd discussed it. I'd promised. I could not deny her this last wish. I knew it was what she wanted. She did not deserve to suffer. I took her serenity pillow from behind me on the chair. I put the pillow over Gran's face and held it there. It didn't take long. When all was silent, I moved the pillow away. I hugged it to my chest with all my strength. There she was, my Gran. She looked for all the world as though she was fast asleep, her eyes closed, her mouth slightly open, her face serene, at rest.
Fantasy Sounds, music, radio, podcasts.
The final episode of The Maid by Nita Prose. Molly has her day in court. Today is a beautiful day for so many reasons. I have just arrived at the Regency Grand, and I'm bounding up the scarlet steps toward Mr. Preston.
Molly,
He says, his whole face a smile.
it's nice to see you at work instead of across the crowded courtroom.
Isn't it a beautiful day, Mr. Preston?
That it is,
He replies.
We're at work, and Rodney is behind bars. All is right with the world.
For the most part, being on the stand was not difficult. All I had to do was listen to the questions and respond with the truth. My truth. The hardest part was when Charlotte asked me to walk the court through my memory of the day I found Mr. Black dead in his bed. I steadied my gaze and my voice. I wasn't alone. In the room, I said. I thought I was at first, but I wasn't. Charlotte swiveled on her heel and turned my way.
Molly, what are you talking about?
I swallowed, then spoke. After I called down to reception for help the first time, I put the receiver down. Then I turned toward the bedroom door, and that's when I saw it. Molly, I want you to think very carefully before you speak, Charlotte calmly advised, though her eyes were wide with alarm.
What did you see?
There was a mirror on the far wall in front of me.
A mirror,
she said. And what was reflected in it? First, myself, my terrified face. Then behind me, to my left, in the shadowy corner by Giselle's armoire, was a person. My eyes locked with Charlotte's. It was as though her mind were an intricate machine, reading me, deliberating on how to proceed.
And was this person holding anything?
She asked. A pillow.
Molly, is the person you saw standing in that dark corner present in this courtroom today?
I'm afraid I would not be comfortable saying, I said.
Because you don't know?
Because when I turned from the mirror to get a direct look at the figure in the dark corner, I fainted. When I woke up, the person wasn't there anymore. Charlotte nodded slowly. What happened when you came to? She asked. I called reception for the second time. But there was no one in the room at that point. Just me. Well, me and the corpse of Mr. Black. I said.
Is it possible, Molly? And I'm not saying it was, but is it possible that the person in the dark corner was Rodney Styles?
Rodney's lawyer jumped to his feet.
Objection! Sustained, the judge replied.
After a long interval, Charlotte finally said,
No further questions, Your Honor.
For a moment, I thought it was over. But then I remembered we were only halfway through. Rodney's lawyer sauntered toward me, stopping right in front of me, and staring me down. I can't recall every word that was said, but I do remember treading the same old ground, telling the same story the same way every time I was asked. There was just one moment when Rodney's lawyer drilled into me with particular vigor.
Molly, there's something I still don't understand about your story. You were given ample opportunity to tell Detective Stark about the figure in the corner of the hotel suite that day. Doing so might have even exonerated you. And yet time after time, you never mentioned seeing someone. Did you lie to Detective Stark when you first told her about what you saw in that hotel room?
I did not lie, I say. On the contrary, one of the first things I said to Detective Stark was that when I announced my arrival in the suite, I thought someone was there with me.
But the detective obviously assumed you meant Mr. Black.
And that's why assumptions are dangerous, I said.
Ah,
he replied.
So you omitted the whole truth. That too is a lie, Molly.
He eyed the judge, who tilted her chin down ever so slightly.
And can you please enlighten us, Molly, as to why you failed countless times to clarify to investigators your claim that someone else was in the room and that this person was holding a pillow?
Because I was...
Was what, Molly?
I wasn't 100% sure what it was I'd seen. I've learned to doubt myself and my perceptions of the world around me. I do realize I'm different, you know. Different from most. Plus, people don't always listen to me. I'm just a maid. A nobody. And what I saw in that moment, it felt like a dream. But I know now that it was real. Someone with a deep motive killed Mr. Black. And that wasn't me. I looked at Rodney then, and he looked at me. It was as though for the very first time, he was seeing me for who I really am. Gran always said that the truth is subjective, which is something I failed to comprehend until my own life experience proved her wisdom. Now I understand. My truth is not the same as yours, because we don't experience life in the same way. The version of the truth I told on the stand on my day in court is exactly that, a version of my experiences on the day that I found Mr. Black dead in his bed. Justice is like truth. It too is subjective. So many of those who deserve to be punished never receive their just deserts. And in the meantime, good people, decent people, are charged with the wrong crimes. It's a flawed system, justice. A dirty, messy, imperfect system. On my day in court, I told those gathered about the day I found Mr. Black dead in his bed. I told it how I saw it, how I lived it. Only I cut the story short. Yes, I did check Mr. Black's neck for a pulse. I did call down to reception asking for help. I did turn to the bedroom door and catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror. Only then did I realize I was not alone in the room. There was, in fact, a figure standing in the corner. A dark shadow fell across the person's face, but I could see their hands clearly, and a pillow, clutched close to their heart. This figure reminded me so much of myself. And of Gran. It was as if I was seeing myself reflected twice in the mirror. That's when I fainted. When I awoke, I found myself on the floor, beside the bed. Someone was fanning my face with hotel stationery. After a few deep breaths, my vision sharpened. It was a woman. She was middle-aged, with salt and pepper hair, held back by the sunglasses propped on her head. She was crouched over me, a worried look on her face. I didn't recognize her face. Not at first. "I'm terribly sorry," I said. "I didn't realize there was another guest in the room. But I must—" "You must nothing." She reached out her hand. "Can I help you?" I put my unsteady hand in hers, and with her assistance, I was soon standing beside her. The room came into sharper focus. The ground was solid beneath my feet. We stood there beside the bed, looking at each other for a moment. "We don't have much time," she said. "Do you know who I am?" She looked vaguely familiar, but she also looked like every other middle-aged female guest who frequented the hotel. And that's when it hit me, from the newspapers. It was Mrs. Black. Not the second Mrs. Black, Giselle, but the first Mrs. Black, the original wife. Mrs. Black, I'm terribly sorry to intrude, but I believe Mr. Black is dead. She nodded slowly.
My ex-husband was a cheater and a thief and an abuser and a criminal.
I started to put it together then. Did you kill Mr. Black?
I suppose that depends on your point of view, she said. I believe he killed himself. Slowly, over time, and that he became infected by his own greed. That he robbed his children and me of a normal life. That he modeled corruption and evil in just about every way a man can. My 2 sons are his clones. And they're now drug-addled slobs who flit from party to party, spending their father's money. And my daughter Victoria, all she wants is to clean up the family business, to run it with some decency. But her own father wants to disown her. He wouldn't have stopped until Victoria and I were both destitute. And he did this even though she's a 49% shareholder. Well, she was a 49% shareholder. She'll be more than that now.
She looked at Mr. Black, dead on the bed, then back at me.
I came only to talk to him, to ask him to give Victoria a chance. But when he let me in, he was drunk, popping pills, muttering about Giselle being a gold-digging bitch. Just like me.
She paused.
He grabbed me by the wrists. I'll have bruises.
Just like Giselle, I said.
Yes. Just like the new and improved Mrs. Black. I tried to warn her, Giselle, but she didn't listen. Too young to know any better.
Her eyes darted to the pillow on the floor, then away.
Tell me, do you ever feel like the world is backward? Like villains prosper and the good suffer?
It was as though she were reading my deepest thoughts. Yes, I said. I feel that way all the time.
Me too, she replied. In my experience, there are times when a good person must do something that's not quite right. But it's still the right thing to do.
Yes, she was right.
What if it were different this time? She asked. What if we took matters into our own hands and balanced the scales? What if you didn't see me? What if I just walked out of the hotel and never looked back?
You'd be recognized, would you not?
If people actually read the newspapers delivered to their doors, but I doubt they do. I'm largely invisible. Just another grey-haired, middle-aged woman in loose-fitting clothes and sunglasses walking out the back door of the Regency Grand. Just another nobody.
Invisible in plain sight. Just like me. That was the last time I saw Mrs. Black. The first Mrs. Black. Or didn't see her. So much depends on your point of view. Once she was gone, I cleaned things up, as I said I would. I put the pillow she left behind into the laundry hamper in my trolley. I called down to reception for the second time, once I fully regained consciousness, just like I said in court. And at long last, a few minutes later, help arrived. I sleep well at night now. Perhaps better than I ever have before, because I lie beside Juan Manuel, my dearest friend in all the world. I listen to his breathing, like rolling waves. In, out, in. And I count my blessings. There are so many of them, it's daunting. I know my conscience is clean, because I make it through fewer and fewer blessings each night before I fall into pleasant dreams. I wake up refreshed and joyful, ready to seize the day. If all of this has taught me anything, it is this. There's a power in me I never knew was there. I always knew there was power in my hands, to clean, to wipe away dirt, to scour and disinfect, to set things right. But now I know there's power elsewhere, in my mind, and in my heart, too. Gran was correct, after all. About all of it. About everything. Life has a way of sorting itself out. Everything will be okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end. The Maid, by Nita Prose, was read by me, Bridget Lappin. It was abridged by Rowan Routh and produced by Nicola Holloway. The Maid is a BBC Books production for BBC Sounds. And if you enjoyed The Maid, there are lots of other great audiobooks on BBC Sounds, like Careering by Daisy Buchanan, People Person by Candice Carty Williams, and How to Kill Your Family by Bella Mackey.